Hello,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, I am well as well. Will you please tell us your name?
Yeah, my name is Sid Siddiqui.
And will you share a little bit about yourself, something that you feel comfortable telling us? Where you live, what field you work in, where you went to school, anything that you feel comfortable sharing.
Well, I went to college, which used to be called Luke College. Now it's Harold Washington College, right in downtown Chicago. And I went to school there at the time when the first black mayor of Chicago, Harold Washington, was elected as mayor of Chicago. So, I'd kind of, it's funny because I lived in Hyde Park at that time, which was also, mayor's home. So when I remember on Channel 5, I was watching the news and they announced that he has won. So I just walked over to his, I think it was a condo building, and he came out. And I saw this one guy that, some of the older folks may still remember, Jay Levine, who used to be one of the channel, TV personality. And I saw him run across the road, and then there comes Harold Washington, and we were all there and saying, "Hey, how are you? Congratulations, good job!" And he gave his speech, and then so that's kind of my recollection of back in 1980s.
Yeah.
You know.
Is Chicago your natural home? Is that's your
No, I actually came here. I migrated, immigrated from Pakistan, and went to school. Went to Loop College, obviously. Then went to DePaul, graduated from there, and got into IT. Took some classes in IT and all that. Got hired by some IT technology companies, and sort of made my way through
excellent?
to what you see.
Yeah. And what type of IT position are you in now? What do you do in information technology?
So I'm in software development and implementation,
Okay.
um, on the Microsoft side of the business.
Mhm. How do you see emerging technologies such as blockchain, robotics, artificial intelligence, biometrics, algorithms. How do you see these technologies coming into our world, and how do you think they will impact the global marketplace, but even more specifically, people with less education, less skill? How do you see these emerging technologies as they unfold?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if, I can get more deeper into how it will affect the less educated and less fortunate versus highly educated and highly fortunate. I think whatever comes out impacts everybody in one way, shape, and form.
Mhm.
Um, so having said that, I don't know a whole lot about blockchain. I know that few years ago there was a huge hype and it sort of went way up. And then when there were some rules, regulations, and all that, it took a nosedive. And now we are starting to see it go up again. You talked about robotics and all that, but I'm really not on that side of the business. I'm more on the operational side of business, which is more kind of your standard Microsoft ERP and CRM and those kind of projects that run businesses in the world today.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I think it's really noble that you don't step farther than you're comfortable doing. Because a lot of people will start professing things that they know about these technologies and don't really have a good grip of what they really mean. So I appreciate that very much. So, in the work that you do, how will your work change as new technologies come on board? So, we have, like I think Salesforce is probably the biggest organization that does the work with, CRM and some of the other pieces and parts of that. So, how do you see that changing, if at all?
I mean, CRM or Salesforce, Google. I mean, all these technologies keep evolving. There are always new features, functionalities, driven by the user's demand. So I think they will continue to evolve and change, and depending on which platform are we using, how we are communicating, how we are buying, how we are selling, how we are doing business, and all that. And technologies sort of either sometimes they are a little bit ahead of the curve, or a lot of times they're sort of following the curve, kind of following the new trends and all that. Um, so, they will continue to change. I mean, if you go back 5, 6 years ago, we didn't hear a whole lot about cloud. Today, it's all about cloud, even though Amazon had been there with their cloud,
Or
20 years ago, but not many people knew what was going. It used to be known as someone who sold books,
yeah,
but before we know it, it's selling us groceries and meals and
yeah,
delivering anything and everything. So technology sort of follows those trends, and I think COVID, if nothing else, it taught us that a lot of our daily affairs could be virtual,
yep,
and people can adapt and get used to it and actually be productive. So I think a lot of times situations like that, they evolve and they sort of drive the technology.
yeah. I think that's absolutely on point because there's a lot of talk about the disruption in the global marketplace, specifically in careers, employees, and what we can do. And I don't know how much you pay attention to the stuff I put on LinkedIn, but I did a chat for All Things Open. They work in the open source code market. And I did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I don't know if you saw
Mm.
that movie, but it's about a little boy who wins a golden ticket and eventually wins a factory. But the really geeky part of that movie is his father loses his job screwing toothpaste tops on the toothpaste. And he is replaced by a robot. And the way the movie ends, he gets his job back. There's nothing clearly articulated in that movie as to how he got his job back, or did he go back and retool or learn some new skills or whatever, but he got his job back fixing the robot that had replaced him. And so what really interests me about these things as we are now is how far away are we from the point where many or much of what we know as traditional labor force can be replaced by automation or robotics.
I mean, it's replacing it. It's not a question of if. It's now it's sort of we need to look back and say how it replaced or how it changed. How did we become, going to the Barnes and Noble to buy our book into ordering that book online, or reading it on an e-reader, or most of the times now everything is virtual, right? So um, I think those things will continue to happen and evolve. Most of the times, it's up to us as human race to figure out, okay, what am I not catching up to? What is leaving me behind? What can I do to get up to the speed? It's like 10 years ago, I would say maybe yeah, you know, I used to hear a lot about um, that our parents didn't know technology, but we were going to school, so we knew technology, and but today it's our kids that know the gadgets, and that they are born with those gadgets in their hand, and it's really on us as parents now to say, oh, am I up to the speed with what my kid is doing, or how they are using the technology and all that. So I think technology in that way is sort of will always be ahead of the, and depending on the age group you are, or maybe the income group you are, or maybe in the social economy, where you are placed, right, in terms of how you are, you have gone to high school, or you have gone to college, or you have gone to university, or maybe none of these, but you are a geek, in which case you will always be up. So depending on where you are at a specific time, in that you will either, be ahead of the curve, be with the curve, or behind the curve, as I call it.
Absolutely. I think that's spot on. And I think there's a part of that that you hit on, like where are the parents, so and that is tied to many things, not just education, but your economic level, right? So does your kid have home internet, and with us doing remote learning because of COVID, that's been a very large question. There's a part of understanding, like I have two children and I speak three different languages because I have to speak the language that the one speaks different from the one the other one speaks. And it's like it's kind of like trying to master those languages when you're not even sure what the phrases mean, So I think that, staying in touch with what your children are doing and how prepared these digital natives are really requires us to really either put our hands up and say, nope, not going to get involved in it, or fully immerse ourselves in what they're doing. And I think that's a challenge, going to be a challenge for a lot of parents, especially as a parents like me, a baby boomer. I was born in the 50s, so technology has changed a lot. I still keep my pulse on it, but it's
Well,
not.
you seem like you're doing pretty good. I mean, with these, the web, recording and talking to people and kind of interacting, with, whatever theme and ideas that you have, at least I think you have a probing mind, which I think, if nothing else, if people, regardless of the income level or academic level or the financial level they are at, if they just have this probing mind,
Yeah,
which you are demonstrating, you can go, ways, in terms of learning and asking the next question, or, seeing what's behind, this stone. What is it that I can explore? What can I do? So I think that, that in itself is a great skill to have.
absolutely. But I think that I may be an exception and not a rule, because I started out when mainframes were around. When you talk about CRM, customer resource management, and all that, like the applications back then were CICS. It was, it did all these things that these new tools are doing. And what my background is like I do not have a degree in IT or in computer science, because when I started out, you did the work. You did the work. And then as it grew, it was more copy and pasting. If you take just the networking part, so we went from VTAM, or system network architecture, to token ring, from token ring to TCP/IP. So it wasn't like you had to go to school and learn it, because you were literally there making those changes. So that's why I may be a little bit of an oddball, but I would say that there are a lot of parents, more fluent than I am, more educated than I am, that will struggle with this because it's not native to us, right? It's not, it doesn't come, if you're not somewhat of a nerd or a geek, some parts of this becomes, mind numbing, right? So, like, why do I want to crunch numbers, or why do I want to know how many bytes of data are in this data set, or protect the data, or cybersecurity? All of these things are kind of like, for some people, they are just misaligned, and we have to figure out how to correct that. And as a society, specifically working in IT, we need to not only think about, the work that we're doing and our paycheck, but then how do we actually provide a way for our communities to grow? And so that leads me to my next question. And so, how often do you go back to Pakistan? How often do you go home?
Well, my mom is still there, so I go there to say hello to her whenever I can.
Yeah,
But this is home now. I have two kids here, and this is where I live. This is where I work. This is where my friends are and all that. So it's kind of you are in between. I mean, I won't say in between two worlds, even though I could say that, but it's more like I spend most of my time here, and then I have these occasional trips, that I take to go meet my folks. And my dad died, so
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Uh, so, but the reason why I asked you the question was not necessarily
Mhm.
that, but to ask you, like, how do you assess technology in Pakistan, and the worlds around, and the countries and continents and places around you? I mean, do you have a sense for where they are in the spectrum of where current and emerging technologies are rising and falling?
Of course, I think most of the Asian countries, um, they have sort of taken a pretty steep road towards technology. That's why if you call any of one of these big companies here, chances are the call would be picked up in India or Pakistan or Philippines or where not. That means they have improved their infrastructure, they have improved their telecom service. They have improved their um, processes, basically operations and processes and all that. So, they and they have a lot of people that are available, right? That go through their school system and all that. So I think this world is becoming a small
Yep.
place. We used to call it a small world, but it is happening right in front of our eyes. So
Mm.
when I go there, I mean, I see a lot of advancement. I see them, doing leaps and bounds and all that. They're just constrained by, their amount of funding that's available to them. And it's kind of, maybe if I go to the south side of Chicago, and I'll see some communities there that are, struggling, and that, the schools are not there, or the healthcare facilities are not there, and a lot of these benefits, that help you sort of, grow. But then again, you hear stories like Obama and say, you know, here's someone who lived on South Side, and became president. So, we do have stories like that. But I think world as a whole is sort of getting up to the speed when it comes to technology and all that. And we hear stories every day that today it was, you know, here where something took place, or somebody invented, or somebody did something, and yeah, so it's sort of all over. I mean, I don't think I would separate Pakistan from, India or Philippine, or whatnot, or any of the other Eastern European countries.
Yeah. Well, that's very good to know, because I think you're absolutely right. I was on the phone with AT&T one day last week.
Yeah, and the
And
call gets picked up somewhere else. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm sitting here saying, and we were really having a communications problem, because I'm also hard of hearing, but I couldn't master what she was saying to me. And so finally we said, okay, let me take the phone off speaker and let me just put the phone really close to my ear, and then I'll figure it out. And so we absolutely managed to. But I will tell you, that's a pain point for a lot of Americans, is that you get routed somewhere who doesn't really have fully master the language. But I think your point about the world shrinking, the 6 degrees of separation, right? So how far are you away from President Obama, right? So you are in Chicago, Harold, so that 6 degrees of separation really becomes a real thing, the
Well,
world.
he may not remember it, but I was only, 6 feet away from him once, before he became a senator. He actually came out to McCormick Place, and I was there on our yearly Eid. I'm a Muslim, so there was Eid congregation, and I was sitting in the first row, and he was one of the speakers that came out on Friday prayer, and he said, "Vote for me. I'm Barack Hussein Obama." And my mom, my grandfather named me Barack because it means baraka, which means, giving and all that. And, he went through all that because, predominantly, I mean, everybody was there to pray Friday prayers. And, it was like a big Muslim gathering and stuff. And I was there, for a convention to, and I was sitting in the first row, and I'm like, oh, I don't think he would become a senator. He's like, this thin, guy. I mean, just like any average, I have lots of friends who are like that, that I went to school with,
Yeah.
and that were more handsome and more taller and bigger and articulate. But I think he did okay. And then, look, he won. There was whole community support. And then, one day he walked in Grant Park and accepted his presidential election and all that. And so we all remember that. But yeah, so kind of tells us a lot about opportunities. If you are, Black and live on South Side, and what can you do? What are the possibilities? And your mom is a single mom.
The answer is anything, you have to put your mind to it. But
Anything is possible. Yeah.
yeah, I will tell you my 6 degrees of separation. So I'm a golfer. I love
Okay.
golf. And so I got a chance to go to the Masters, and I went to the
Okay.
Masters. And so I was probably less than 6 feet away from Tiger Woods. And I mean, he was just
Wow.
absolutely everything for me, so I still to this day, I follow his career. And so It's just amazing. Of course, they got security all around you. You can't touch him, but just the very fact that I was that close to him was just absolutely mind-numbing. I was like, this is just amazing that I got to see him, because, when you see somebody on TV, they look very different than they do in person, right? So,
Well, I told you I went to Luke College, and I was part of a group called PTK, Phi Theta Kappa. That was like an honor fraternity, and I got involved with that. And one of the trips we took was to Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee. And as we checked into our hotel, it was like Holiday Inn or something like that. We checked in, I walked into the lobby, and there was Muhammad Ali.
yeah,
And I said, "Oh, you are Muhammad Ali, the famous." And he's like, "Yeah, how are you?" And I'm like, "Can I take a picture with you?" And I was like, I didn't know what else to say. And he just put his arm around me. And then, I cherished that picture, forever. And then that was kind of, my kind of, I just come to the States, and here I ran into Muhammad Ali. So that was like my big famous moment. I wrote home about and told all my friends. And in those days, there was no Facebook, so I
right.
had to mail the
Yes.
picture with my letter and all that. But yeah, so
Yep, absolutely. So I only have two questions. I know we're on a time thing, so I'm going to ask you this question. In your career, from the moment that you decide to be a technologist, have you faced diversity? And diversity, what I mean by that, have you had experiences where you did not feel like you belonged, or you were included, or that your voice or your thoughts mattered in your career?
somebody asked me that when I came here a long time ago, and I told them, I said, I'm from Pakistan, and we had black people there, and we had yellow people there, and we had some people who lived on the mountain that looked at, as Caucasian as any Europeans. And the first time I heard anything about race
Is in America.
was when I came to Chicago. That's when
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
realized that there is a black, right, ghetto, and there's whites, and there's Latin, right, so some gangs there, or some people. And my boss was actually from Puerto Rico, so he would give, like, give me advice and enhance my I would ask him, I'm like, what do you mean by race? Why is there this tension? Because I had no idea. I would go and talk to anybody and everybody. To me, I was sort of colorblind. But yeah, as I went to school here, I went to work and all that. Luckily, I really didn't personally faced whole lot of, I mean, not whole lot, any discrimination in that sense, because I came here to study. I studied, got my degree, got into technology. And in technology, it's like a lot of Indians and Pakistanis and Asians and all that. And so, and then I got to work for Microsoft, and then, music and all that. So I I was sort of on the, because I was on the technical side, so I didn't really feel, a whole lot of discrimination personally. But I learned, and and my kids, actually, my daughter, she was, she joined all the Black Lives Matter, kind of, campaigns, and the, marches and all that. So they have educated me a lot more. And then a lot of times I'm like, really, a lot of that happens and stuff. But yeah, so luckily I sort of didn't really get into a whole lot of that or personally experienced it. So maybe I just was, I mean, I lived on South Side. I worked for University of Chicago, which is on the South Side. And then I moved to North, and I have, I went to DePaul, and I've lived here. But I haven't experienced a whole lot, but I know it's there. And I know I have some great, friends, best buddies who are African Americans. And, we have talked very freely. One of my buddies, actually, he was an instructor, and, he had done his master's. He used to drive a Mercedes, and he got married to a white lady. And so he would always tell me stories about how he would get stopped in Schaumburg, and people will, cops would ask him to show his, if he was married,
Yeah.
or who's this lady sitting next to him, and he's like, Sid, I get stopped. It doesn't fail, and that was like about 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. So I know things have changed now, as we are going through this period. But those are sort of my experiences, through friends and all that.
Well, I would say you are very, very fortunate if that is indeed the case, because I will tell you that's a rarity.
Right.
Because, depending on where you are and what time you're there, I mean, you could pass for a Black man, you could pass for a Hispanic man and or a Latinx person, but that you've not experienced that is really says a lot about where you live, and I guess the places where you go and interact, and I'm sure.
Maybe I was just too focused in what I was doing.
Yeah.
And because, technology kept me very busy and I was always learning, you know, trying to sort of struggle. I had my own struggles to
Yeah.
support myself and work. And so I would do 3 jobs to pay my bills. And, I did that for a long time. So I really didn't have time to think about a lot of these social issues or what's going on out there and all that. If I had money to pay my bills and had, to pay my rent and pay my school bills, that's pretty much what I was focused on. But I'm sure a lot of that was going on and
Yeah.
goes on.
I applaud that you've had pretty much a touchless interaction with race, and that's really an amazing thing, because I will tell you there are not very many people that are look like you and I that have that experience, because I'm sure you know how many Black and brown people are killed,
Of course. Yeah.
by law enforcement, not just by each other or by other groups, but it's a kind of stain on our society. Um, I do want to ask you one question though. You mentioned about like not experiencing this. So I have quite a few friends from India, and we talk a lot. I spend a lot of time talking to them. And so what was interesting to me was to learn about a caste society versus racism or discrimination
Oh, yeah.
America. So he one of them was telling me, he said, depending on what your last name is, depending on where you are in the social stratus, you may or may not have access and have everything you need. And I was sitting there thinking, like, I don't know, like I can barely understand how we get racism between Black and white and brown and all the other ethnicities, but how do you get some form of discrimination in a country where all the people have you're almost the same type of people? Maybe they practice a different religion, but I mean they almost all look alike. You almost all have similar, the way you communicate and speak. And most of the people I know are extremely polite and really nice people. So how can you have a caste system based on some archaic idea about social structure, and whether your great grandfather was a farmer versus a governor or a military person? That was just shocking for me. And so someone recently just wrote a book, which I read, but I mean, it's just amazing to me to see how no matter where you are in the world, there's a little dot somewhere that's saying
Well,
that
it's the same thing where, you raise the question of how can you have a caste system, which today, you and I cannot even imagine living in a society or being part of that. Same question can be asked, how could there be slavery? And
exactly.
that wasn't too long ago. That was like, you know, recently, right? The caste system had been there for centuries and people live with it and they adapted so I mean, all these areas, I think, for us are to, to look at, learn from them, and see what we can do to change them. And, because God created, I mean, I'm a Muslim. I believe in, God created people equal. There is no difference between men and women. There is no difference between black and white and yellow and purple. We are all part of human race, and that's pretty much what we should live by, and that's how we should treat each other. I should treat everybody with the same respect that I expect them to treat me, and you know that's yeah, there are a lot of, we can ask those how questions about past, but I think it would really help us if we can look at the future and then say, hey, let's build a world, let's have a world that is different than what our forefathers did or what our ancestors did and sort of rise above and beyond. And each one of us can be an example of that. It's just like I was not used to knowing what racism was until I came to America, and that's where I learned there is really this difference just based on your color, because I never saw that in Pakistan. We saw racism based on the language, depending on if you spoke this language versus that, which was different. We're like, okay, so they don't speak Urdu, these people don't speak Punjabi or Sindhi. There was a dialect, so they don't get along. That was easy to understand it, but they all look the same, in terms of their color and all that. But yeah, I think these are challenges, and we should work to resolve those. That's a great cause.
Yeah. Sid, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. I will leave minutes for you if you have something you wish to say or share in addition to what we've talked about here. And once the recording converts, I'll send you a link. Please review it and then let me know if I may upload it. But thank you so much for taking your time out to talk with me today. Okay. And I wish you all the best in 2021.
I enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.